Hello again, everyone. This is CM Kozaman with the part 4 of the super incredible travel adventure inspiration trip guide series of YouTube podcasts. If you just started watching with this video, this has been a 4-episode now podcast on basically how to take these special kinds of trips in which you are free to do as you will with your own time. You don't need to follow a schedule. You don't have any time-driven objectives, but you are basically free to explore the world as you see fit. And in doing so, you kind of break your comfort zone, push your boundaries, do things you've never done before, and in an interesting way, freshen up your mind and find sustenance for your spirit. So in the first 3 episodes, basically we talked about the basic intent and quote-unquote headspace of such trips. You know, these could change from something as simple as going to a part of the town you've never been before and just walking through streets and just looking at stuff without aim and purpose. Or it could be something as complicated as going on a multi-day or multi-week even car vacation and just driving around aimlessly and exploring places, which we are going to discuss in this episode. But before we go ahead, I would like to ask everyone to donate to me on patreon.com. I can't stress this enough. The link is below and in the video description. And every penny, even if you donate $1 a month, it really helps me out in the long run. And I'm very grateful to have all you nice and gracious supporters. If you donate to me on Patreon, you also get to see many extra content from yours truly, including surreal paintings and excerpts from upcoming books such as, yes, I know, All Tomorrows. Okay. In the second episode, I discussed what to pack basically, and in the third episode, basically, it was a protracted guide to how to take trains and buses and just explore and get from point A to point B that way. Today, we're going to be discussing this extensive mobile vehicular combined arms vacation, which more often than most in this day and age, my American friends will be able to afford. I mean, granted, many people these days have automobiles, but believe me, in places like Europe, or the Balkans, or other parts of the world, gas is actually quite prohibitively expensive. So if you just say, I'm just going to drive around and explore places, you're actually putting a lot of money on the line. And in even some countries, like the one I'm living in, basically if you're born after the year 1995, buying a car might even be completely unaffordable. Unless you take out a bank loan, but then again you become a slave to the bank, so you have to work to pay that loan, so it becomes a kind of spiraling depression spiral to black hole, whatever. Anyway, so considering you're lucky enough to afford a car and gas and also some time to just basically disappear, here is how you can go on these trips. Basically, I was lucky enough back in the day with my wife to go on these unplanned vacations to Mediterranean islands, and these were all off-season vacations. So we would go to Sicily, but in October or something, and explore the whole island. The airplane tickets would be cheap, and after landing on the airport, by the way, I'm not even going to discuss air travel, because I think even though as efficient as it is, with airplane travel, there's a lot of planning. All I can recommend to you is be on the fucking airport 3 or 4 hours ahead of time. Just spend some time reading a book. And the whole process is so stressful and time-oriented. This is how my mind works. If there's a time at which I have to be somewhere, or the entire enterprise falls apart. If this happens, I just lose interest. It becomes like a boring thing to me, even though I might be going to a completely nice and free, carefree place. it just becomes boring and slightly depressive. So for me, these free expeditions, these inspiring adventure trips, they always begin when I leave the freaking airport, if airplane travel is involved. It's just an inhumane way to travel and an inhumane way to basically live, you know, having a place you have to be on it at certain time or the whole enterprise falls apart. I think this is like, in the future, it's going to be almost up there with gladiator arenas and slavery, maybe. I don't know. It's just despicable. Anyways, let's not get sidetracked. So, like, I was talking about how I really liked such trips, especially in the Mediterranean islands. So once you arrive to this place, it could be Sicily, Sardinia, Crete, Rhodos, or some of the other places. Basically, what you do is you go to a car hire place and you talk to the guys. Okay. And I always get the cheapest car ever because I'm just cheap that way, I guess. The good thing about me is I can drive stick shift, and if you can't drive stick shift, what are you even? Nah, I'm just joking. But I actually enjoy driving. I don't enjoy speeding particularly, but I enjoy, like, you know, turning the wheel, getting around the place, seeing new places, exploring shit. I like that kind of stuff. So maybe another prerequisite for this kind of trip is for you to be comfortable with such a way of transport. Like, I'm completely fine, you know, driving at 3 a.m. in the middle of some country road somewhere. If I feel sleepy, I just pull over and sleep. I always signal when I'm turning, even if I'm on an uninhabited country road. I always, this might sound boring or cringe, but I always obey speed limits. And then I just like taking these cars as far as they can go. And on the way, of course, I had some mishaps. No crashes, but there have been a few cases where I was like, yeah, I think I could drive through this ravine. And then the car just got stuck there. And you learn. Anyway, so imagine you arrived at your destination. It could be, like, as I said, an island. Or a good practice in this kind of adventure is also to rely on printed maps. And, like, if you even think about using a sat-nav or these, like, map apps that Google has or smartphones have, get out of here. This is not the place for you, because the whole purpose of these trips is to go into these headspaces where you don't have to get somewhere, but you're just in an open-minded expeditionary mode. Now, if you use a kind of navigation aid, it kind of cancels the whole purpose. You're reduced to getting from point A to point B, and you just ignore everything around you. Whereas in an ideal circumstance, you should be able to, like, flip open a map. I don't know where you want to go. Like, one of these places I really wanted to go but never had a chance to go is the far northern Atlantic seaboard of Spain. That's, like, very mountainous and wild, apparently. Like, I would really like to go there, for example. And in this case, what I would do would be to just get a map of this place, maybe print it from Google Maps, but always rely on a printed map. And just with your, like, kind of examine the area, see what there is. Like, you know, if you kind of look at maps long enough, you realize that on mountains there are lots of mountain villages, and, like, a winding road usually means a hill or a mountain. Like, I always try to go to these, like, weird, least popular, but the short of the long matter is that you can feel from a map, after a certain amount of practice, you can feel from a map where would be an interesting place to go. I mean, it's just a kind of hunch or intuition you develop over the time, but I'm sure many of you will agree, but if you look at a map and like if there's, for example, a seaboard facing side of a mountain or a hill, or like a cluster of small villages in a place with nothing around it, like that place is probably interesting. If you live in Europe and the old world, another good practice is also always to go on these Roman or Greek ruins. They never disappoint. You know, you could make the point of your adventure could be to like go in a certain part of this coastline in Turkey, Greece, Italy, Croatia, wherever, and just visit all the ancient ruins that you see on the printed map in your hand. So with that sort of a loose objective, you just set out. Now, a great part of traveling in these Mediterranean islands, now it's going to be my baseline example, but I'm just going to use it as a kind of modus operandi description for you. You know, I don't mean to brag about my Mediterranean vacation, but like once you go there, you kind of get a map and you look at the area. Another good practice is always to ask human beings, like, what's a good part to visit that's kind of interesting to explore or off the beaten chart. But don't look at a fucking Lonely Planet guide, or don't look at an internet site, but just ask people and, you know, ask local people. And unless they troll you really hard, their advice is going to be very, very valuable. I remember this one case where I'm not going to give any places or names, but I was traveling with this friend who was obsessed with this fucking Blue Planet guide or Lonely Planet guide, whatever that was. And he made a point of like stopping at every place. Oh, the guide says there's a nice chocolate bar here. The guide says there's a nice restaurant here. The guide says there's a nice garden here. The guide says there's a nice bistro here. The guide told me to skin you alive. He was this kind of a guy. He would never trust his, like, we drove past these amazing beaches, and I was like, hey, let's stop here for a while, you know? Let's stop and take a swim. I was like, no, we have to get to this temple. When we got to that fucking place, turns out it's a fucking tourist trap with like tour buses all over the place. I mean, that's what you get for trusting the bloody Lonely Planet guide. Throw that thing away. So, trust your eyes, trust local people. Always have a map, of course. And it goes without saying, like, at this level, you should be able to, like, drive on mountain roads and not panic if you're, like, on a single lane road and another vehicle is approaching. You should be able to reverse. You should be able to parallel park, operate a stick shift car. You know, this is all, like, assumed wisdom at this point. So then you start driving around, and one of my favorite ways of exploring a place is just to, you know, look at the map, see what an interesting part of the area would be, and just drive around there. As you're driving, always also, like, this is also like car driving practice, Fast and Furious style. Don't drive very fast because you're not in a hurry. Stay within the speed limit, and if you see an interesting side road, or a roadside attraction, or a forest, or anything, if you see an interesting stone at the side of the road, pull over, flip that stone, and look under it. If you see an interesting road that seems to go to a weird coastline, take that coast. And in order to do this, you must be able to teach yourself how to basically commit to snap decisions while driving. And it takes some practice, but once you learn, it's pretty easy to do. If you pass that interesting thing, you can also calmly do a U-turn or like reverse if nobody's coming from behind you and, you know, go there. So this is your modus operandi. You go to this interesting part of the location, just drive around and stop at every interesting place. As an artist and a photographer, one of my side quests is always to accumulate, like, take interesting pictures, or I'm also interested in field herping and looking at different weird bugs. So I always like There were cases where I rented, for example, a car in the Taurus Mountains of Turkey, and in an entire day, I only drove like 10 kilometers, but I spent like 5 or 6 different stops, just stopping and taking half an hour to look at this place, half an hour to look at that ruin, go stone flipping because I just saw a side of a hill, roadside hill, with beautiful flowers growing on it, and I thought maybe this would be an interesting place to flip stones. You get the idea. Now, that's just the basic modus operandi. Now, in these vacations, if you're traveling with somebody, you kind of have to, like, as I described from this example with this acquaintance who was a big fan of the Lonely Planet Guide, you know, I mean, yeah, it was annoying, but I mean, it was his role. It was his way to travel, and this is my way to travel. So you got to know each other on such a trip. Now, in Turkish, there's a great saying, burası er meydanı. Yani dost düşman seyahatte anlaşılır. That is to say, a travel or a trip like this is a kind of setting in which you see what kind of a person a human being is, you know. I mean, I haven't been through, but I've experienced this or heard these nightmare stories from friends who went on Interrail, and because these people were friends from college, so they would hang out all the time, but they would go to their own places after the classes were over or when the party was over. Like in some cases, they did not even live by themselves, but they lived with their parents. So when it came to taking a trip together, they had a huge falling out. They found out that one party maybe doesn't flush after shitting, or they have different priorities when they're going out, when they're socializing, they're meeting people. Like, I mean, it could come down to the little things where, like, someone would buy food and the other would just refuse to pay for it or not even bring it up. And little things like this really make a difference between friends and just people you know. And if you're young, you only get to see this firsthand during a trip together. So if you're going on this car adventure together, make sure you choose your friend or roadside buddy well, or you might have some problems. I mean, also, if it happens that you are on such a trip and the person you are with turns out to be a little flaky, then, be candid and open. Like you say, don't wait for things to boil over. Say, we have different priorities. Do you want to drive? Or like, always it's also a good practice to have some like secret cash reserves on hand. So like you can say, hey, you take the car. I'll just change my whole objective. That kind of agility and flexibility also comes with this terrain. And it's a nice thing. And if you don't get along well, you don't need to fight, but you should be the first one to bring up the possibility of like exploring this place each on our own way. And it's pretty kosher. And it's a good way to decouple harmoniously, let me say. So once you get these out of the way, basically there comes the problem of accommodation. Now, it's also a no-go. If you're on such a trip, you don't fucking make reservations. At least this works very well in the United States and Mediterranean countries. You basically drive. When you're tired, you go to a town, and every town has a hotel or a motel you can stay in. You just park, say hello, sleep in. Also, it's good to stay in these like small, quaint mom and pop hotels, and you can ask them for places to go and tips. And when you ask real people instead of a fucking guide or the fucking hive mind of the internet, you always have better experiences that you remember for the rest of your life. If you go to a freaking place just to have gone to it because it's on a guide somewhere, get out of here. Do you really have a soul? Come on. Have a more quality in you. have a higher quality of spirit. And anyways, so you drive, explore, and when it gets late, you drive to the nearest town or settlement, and you find a place to stay and sleep. Now then, there's always, with these vehicular adventures, there's always the matter of food and water. And I cannot stress this enough. You know, you might be feeling, yeah, I'll find a restaurant, I'll eat somewhere. Okay, maybe you will, and possibly you will. Like when I was driving through America, places like driving through Pennsylvania and shit, I would stop at these roadside Wendy's or like these burger places. Oh, those are great. But every once often, maybe it's getting dark and you spend too much on that mountain, too much time collecting snails or some shit, and then it's gonna take 2 hours to drive to the nearest town where you can sleep, and there's just no place to eat. For this reason, when you start your vehicular adventure, always top up on food, fuel, and water. And also, I mentioned this before, money. Have some money in your wallet. Also, have a second wallet or a money stash. I'm not talking about huge amounts, but like something that could get you out if you're in trouble. Like the car might break down, you might have to call a tow truck. You know, this is your insurance right there. So, always have something like, how should I say it? 1/4 of the national monthly minimum wage, or 1/3. Always like carry this as a reserve with you. Don't spend it, but you know, if things get tough, it might save you from a hurdle. Also, if you're going alone, always charge up your phone, your non-smartphone, of course. You gotta have a dumb phone, and always record numbers for roadside emergency, hospitals, and stuff in advance. I never had a real emergency in these road trips, but I've been in a few hairy situations before. In one case, I followed this wrong sign up a mountain, and instead of taking the normal route, I went up a treacherous, like forestry service road. This is the road people use to cut trees, actually. So, and the car I was driving was like a banged up stick shift Toyota with a half flat tire. The tire had something wrong with it. It kept leaking air. I don't know what. And it was one of the most harrowing experiences in my life. And then when this happens, you should be able to drive slowly. I wanted to reverse, but the forest road was so narrow and so high that each side was a cliff and you couldn't reverse. I just had to drive till the very goddamn end. And it was like, not even like packed earth. It was like a earth road, and anything could have happened. So that's dangerous. Which brings me to another point. If a road looks kind of iffy, don't do it. Always better to stay safe. Don't be daring. I once had this experience where there was like a shallow stream, and some cars were driving through it, but I was thrifty, so I had rented a little like Hyundai i20 or something. This is a small dinky Mediterranean street car. It didn't look like we could drive through that stream, even though it looked very shallow. So I stopped the car, I kind of got out, and it's kind of shallow, but apparently in this stream bed there are these smooth stones, and if the car's wheels get caught on that, you know, I could be trapped. So I actually spent a furious 2 hours driving through an alternate route. And then when I crossed the stream from the long route, that is to say. And then I came to the other end after 2 hours, furious. And then I noticed another small Hyundai. And what they did was they kind of pulled back, went vroom, 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 and crossed the water stream very rapidly, but without turning in a straight line. So when I saw that, I realized I could do it too, and it was a wasted 2 hours, but okay, better safe than sorry. Once it was ridiculous. I wanted to drive to this like hilltop cemetery in the highlands of southwestern Turkey somewhere. And it was like a normal countryside road, you know, packed earth, but very solid. So there turns out there's this like slight depression in the road, and I just got caught in it, and I just couldn't pull out. Fuck! What do you do when this happens? I tried reversing and like, but it just got caught in that depression. It was like a sand pit in there. So I stopped. I had two options. I can try a few more minutes, or I can call roadside assistance and like pay them like a shitty amount of money. So what I did was I actually looked around. I picked up some sticks, like robust dry sticks, and some rough stones, and I laid them under my wheel. I got out of the car. I kind of like pushed the car and aligned it so that the wheel would be right in front of the sticks and stones I had laid. And then I'd reversed and I said, "Come on, baby, don't let me down." And like, and then the car was freed. And the feeling I felt then, not even the hardest orgasm could match it. Ah, so relieving. And adventures like this, you know, really mean a lot. When you're in a little trouble and you kind of extricate yourself from it, it really feels very good. And maybe that's one of the points in having these sorts of combined automobile adventures. And remember, we were talking about food and supplies. So it might seem like you can find some place to eat every time, but you know, never leave this to chance. As soon as you hit the road, you get your car, you arrive, either you come with your own car or you arrive at this destination and rent your car. First place you should go, stop at a supermarket, get like gallon bottles of water, put them in your trunk, because you might get thirsty, especially if this is in summer. Also get these like pre-packed sandwiches or tins of salmon or tuna, biscuits, chocolate, ready-made coffee or caffeinated energy bars. You know, always get these and always top them up. If you see a gas station, always splurge on gas. It doesn't matter. Like, it's better to be like with gas, and like sometimes when you're renting cars, there's this instinct not to get so much gas because you're going to turn it over anyways. But if you're going to have a vacation this style, you know, maybe you're about to like bring the car back, but in the last minute, you see this part of the town, it says go this way for, I don't know, like historic frog district or some shit. But you're so low on gas. You should have topped up. Top up on gas, top up on food, even if you end up eating at fancy restaurants. Like a good friend of mine, whom I shall not name, and me, we were having this driving adventure on the southeastern Turkish city of Mardin, and we were going around the countryside, and this is like a really wild and almost like otherworldly part of the country. There are parts of that area which were not under government control until the last decade. Let me just say that. So we were driving across all these places. Now my friend is of a more reckless, adventurous spirit, but we get along really well. But he's more in the school of I'll cruise if I lose and I'll figure it out. And then there were like 3 of us in this vacation. And okay, my friend was doing the driving, so it's his responsibility. But just before setting off, I was like, "Hey, boys, wait, I gotta go to the shop." And, "Oh, come on, you're such a boomer, blah, blah, blah." These guys are also a few years younger than me. And, you know, I got blasted with charges of being a boomer, but I didn't care. I looked at the car, you know, there's me and these 2 guys. So it's 3 chunkies. For 3 chunkies, For each, I got 2 packs of biscuits, I got 1 can of tuna, I got strawberry milk, chocolate milk, and I got 3 huge bottles of gallon water, like 5 little bottles of water. So I packed, and they were like looking at me as if I was like mentally diseased or something. But come in the evening, we toured this amazing monastery somewhere up on the hills, and suddenly, of course, it grew like late, and everybody remembered that just like Alexander the Great, they're made out of flesh and bone, which means, you're hungry. Fortunately, I had packed these like baby food and tuna tins and like baby biscuits and shit, and like I gave it, come on, let's eat, boys. So we all ate, and we were all happy. Now let this be a lesson to you. So I think in brief, that was my primer on how to conduct these like extensive car trips with a spontaneous adventure mindset. It's a little bit more costly than other sorts of trips, I know, but like if you save for this kind of adventure, you will never be disappointed. My iron rules are: number 1, no fucking sat navs, no fucking smartphones. If you use a smartphone, delete all the map apps. Choose your travel buddies carefully or travel alone. And also, never arrange accommodation beforehand. You can find it pretty much like, it's a weird part of the world. It's a weird fact of the world. It's a weird fact of the world, but places to sleep are easier to find than food or gas or water on the roads. Now, that's one experience from Papa Kozman to you all. So, and also, know the capabilities of your vehicle well, and also like acquire basic driving skills. I just described them to you. You know, if you want to snap commit to a side road, learn how to do it, learn how to drive well. This doesn't mean driving fast, it means driving safe. Also, always to like top up on supplies every day. So that's that, my primer for these road adventures. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you had similar experiences or adventures, please write them in the comment section. I always respond to your comments, and I always read them with relish. And as always, have a nice day, and before leaving, consider supporting me once again on patreon.com. Maybe your contribution can help on my next road trip. Goodbye, everyone. See you later.